Um, my name is Jara Fowl, and I'm a traffic engineer representing NDOT in this traffic calming program project. And I'm joined by my colleague, Liz, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, yes, I'm Liz Tufnell. I also am working with Jara, and we're here for NDOT today.
Okay, so we're here to talk about the traffic calming concept we came up for Collier Avenue. So we can get started on that. So we'll start by going into the 3 E's of traffic calming, which are education, enforcement, and engineering. We're really focusing on the engineering portion of that today because we're not in law enforcement, but we will, I guess, be touching a little bit on the education portion as well, which is just essentially getting people to be a little more informed, and hopefully that influences their driving habits. So we'll start by talking about what traffic calming is. So we work on residential streets and apply physical solutions, whether those are vertical measures or signs or paving, to try to reduce speeds. And we don't do spot projects, so we're really trying to encourage lower speeds along significant lengths of roadway. So, so most of our projects they're going to be pretty considerable in length. So now we'll talk a little bit about the actual program that NDOT has, which is the Neighborhood Street Traffic Calming Program. It's a street program, not a neighborhood program. This is important because we really look at each street individually. And so oftentimes applications will have multiple streets in a particular neighborhood, but we evaluate each street to make sure that the limited resources that are available are really being put where they'll have the most bang for NDOT's buck, where we'll really be able to improve safety by a lot. And so the traffic calming program isn't the only way that you can get resources put into your neighborhood to make it safer or more pleasant to live in. So the first resource is Hub Nashville, which honestly, like pretty much anything outside of traffic calming would go to Hub Nashville. So if there are potholes, if you want a stop sign, anything like that, that would go into Hub Nashville. And then there's the walk and bike manager. We have her information up on the screen, Anna Dearman. So she'd be the person that you want to reach out to if you have questions about getting a bikeway or like bike lanes in your neighborhood or sidewalks or things like that. That would go to her. And then there's the Beautification Commission, where you can reach out if you want to get involved in the Adopt a Street program or like community service or anything like that. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about how your street was brought into the program. So we take applications twice a year. We have 2 cycles every year, and there's plenty of demand across Davidson County. And so as of July 2022, our program had 426 streets that had been applied for, and we selected 27. We normally do about 25, but this year we did a little bit more. And so this shows how we go about prioritizing the streets when we have hundreds of streets to look through. We're evaluating speed. That's kind of the biggest piece of the pie, which we measure the 85th percentile speed, which is basically the speed that 85% of the people driving along that road are going at that speed or less. Because there's always going to be outliers, so we don't want the people who are driving like 95 miles per hour down a neighborhood street. We don't want their speeds to kind of skew our results. We're really looking for like a healthy average of how fast people are going. And so we compare that to the posted speed limit, and that factors into 50% of our ranking. And then we're also looking at crash history. So we take into account the crashes that happened in the past 5 years. We're looking at active transportation. So we're looking to see if there are sidewalks or basically any protection for pedestrians, or if they're forced to walk in the street with the cars. And then we're also looking at neighborhood destinations. Like, are there places that people are inclined to walk to from their house? Just things that would encourage people, again, to be out in the road. And so for your neighborhood, Collier Ave from Dobbs Avenue to Nolensville Road was the stretch of road that got you into the program. There were 3 other streets on the application that we also evaluated, and so those are still in our spreadsheet. They just didn't make it into this cycle, and so every cycle we're going to keep reevaluating them to make sure that they haven't risen to the top of the streets that need our immediate attention. And so those 3 streets will stay in the spreadsheet forever. But if you want us to go out and recollect data, maybe something has changed in your neighborhood and you feel like those streets maybe now will have higher speeds or something than they used to, every 2 years, you're able to ask for us to recollect data to make sure that we're using the most up-to-date numbers. So those 3, basically, there's still a chance that they will get traffic calming in the future. So this is a location map, just kind of visually depicting what we just talked about. So Collier Avenue is the one that we're going to be talking about today, and then we've also highlighted the ones that weren't selected but are still in the program. Does anyone have any questions before I move on to some common traffic calming measures? If you have any questions about the prioritization process or the program in general, I'll give you a minute to come off mute. And if not, we'll move on. And feel free to jump in if you have any questions at any point, or drop them in the chat and Liz will make sure that we address them. Okay, so we'll start with speed cushions. We use these quite a bit in the traffic calming program. There are these rubberized speed humps that go in the street. It's a vertical measure, so vehicles have to drive over them. They're going to be longer and flatter than the speed bumps that you find in like a parking lot. And that's just so that you don't have to come to like a full stop before you go over them. They're just generally more comfortable to go over. They come in a few different lengths, and they kind of taper on the edges, and they have gaps in between them, and that's just to make them a little bit easier for larger vehicles like ambulances or buses or fire trucks or something like that to go over. It's just a little bit easier for them to get over these sorts of measures. Next up, we have signage and markings. And so on the left, you'll see a radar feedback sign paired with a static speed limit sign. And so the radar feedback sign basically just tells you how fast you're going, so that as you're driving, if you're not looking at your speedometer, it'll just kind of tell you like, hey, you might want to slow down because this is the speed limit and this is how fast you're going. It's just kind of a good spot check for people as they're passing through a neighborhood. And then we also have various pavement markings that we use that you can see on the right. And those, again, just kind of call people's attention to the fact that they're driving on a neighborhood road and get their eyes on the road and make sure they're paying attention to what they're doing. So next up, we have narrowing. And so you may have noticed as you're driving around, if you come to a street where it's kind of tight to get through, you are generally more careful as you're driving. You'll probably slow down a little bit more than you would if you're on a road that's super wide and just straight and there's nothing really around to stop you from going super fast. So we're trying to basically create some physical boundaries, whether that's through pavement markings, as you can see on the left, or on the right. There, you can see that the road has been narrowed with those delineators that kind of show that there's a bike lane, and there's also on-street parking. And so again, just narrowing the road a little bit so that people are more inclined to drive carefully. And then we have speed tables, which are similar to the speed cushions. We don't use these as frequently though, because they don't have those gaps in between them to make it easier for larger vehicles to get over them. But they serve very similar purposes to the cushions. And then we have traffic circles. We use these at intersections where the intersections are really large, and as you're passing through the intersection, you might be inclined to go a little bit faster because you have a lot of space. And so again, this just, it creates a physical obstacle that people have to drive around as they're passing through the intersection. And again, makes it a little bit safer because people are going to be driving around a circle more slowly because the radius is a little tighter. Next up, we have chicanes. There are a couple spots around Nashville that you can see chicanes in action, but essentially it kind of forces drivers to do a zigzag down the street, which again, we use those on streets that are wider, where it essentially, it narrows the street, but it also provides a little physical, like horizontal variation as you're going down the street to, again, just make it something that people have to focus on a little bit more, and it's not as easy to just speed straight down. Okay, so this is the program flowchart where we're just going to show like where we are in the process. So you've already done the application. That's what got you into the program. We went through the prioritization process and selected Collier Avenue because Collier Avenue ranked pretty high because there's a lot of pedestrian, there are a lot of places in your neighborhood that people would be inclined to walk to. And also the speeds are pretty high along your street as well. Those are two of the major factors that got you guys such a high ranking in the program. And then we're at meeting 1 right now, where we're going through the program and the toolbox. And then after this meeting, when we'll hopefully get some feedback from you guys when we show you the concept, we'll go to a more detailed design process and we'll set up some full engineering plans. And then for meeting 2, we'll bring those plans and we'll walk through them with the neighbors, and you'll have a better idea of where all of the cushions are going to be, and we can give you like specific locations of like whose house they're going to be in front of and things of that nature. And then we'll take some more feedback from you guys, and then you'll get a mailer kind of similar to the ones that you get for the meetings, but it'll have a QR code that'll take you to an online ballot, and you'll have a unique ID where you can go in and vote yes or no on the measures that are proposed. And so of the people that vote on your street, 66% have to vote yes in order for these proposed measures to be installed. If that doesn't happen, then we'll have to look into some other options for traffic calming. But basically, like, the vote is in the hands of the residents. If you decide that you don't want the measures that we've proposed, we'll figure something else out for you. And then after that, it moves to construction. So if the ballot passes, if 66% of respondents vote yes, then NDOT will order the materials and install the devices, and you'll have traffic calming on your road. So next up, we'll move into the concept that we have proposed for your street. So we have a speed.
Can I interrupt really quick? Can you tell us a little bit more about the length of time that process you just laid out might take?
Sure.
Okay.
So after today's meeting, the design usually takes a few weeks for us to finish up the design, do all the drafting work, and have the plans done, plans ready for meeting 2. And then NDOT will reach out to the neighborhood leads and try to schedule meeting 2. And so that timeline is kind of dependent on the availability of the neighborhood lead and how respondent they are. So that can take, sometimes it maybe takes a week, sometimes it takes a few weeks. It just depends on what time of year it happens to fall in. And then the ballot, there's a 6-week window for the ballots after they go out. So the residents have 6 weeks to vote on the measure, so that's another month and a half. And then if there's a yes, then the materials have to be ordered. NDOT doesn't keep them in stock because they're just there are a lot of projects going on and they don't have the space to store the cushions or other measures if they're delineators or planters or whatever is being installed. There just isn't enough real estate for NDOT to keep all that stuff in hand, like on stock. So that takes another couple of months, is what I've been told lately. And then to get it on the schedule for installation, it goes on the schedule with like repavings and things of that nature. So that takes another like probably 8 weeks. So it's from where we are now to getting it installed, there's probably another, I'd say like 4 months or so, somewhere around there, from here to like the project being done and walking away.
Yeah. And so the next step, which would be the design piece, are you guys going to be, and I missed the first 5 minutes, my apologies, because I thought this was on Google Meet, so I was late coming in, but is your team going to recommend what we should do, or are we voting on several options and being told about all the ones that you just laid out for us, or are we going to be voting on 1 or 2 options, for example?
So you're going to be voting on one option. That's the next slide where I'm showing you what we've proposed. And then we'll talk about that today. And then based off of the feedback that we get from you guys, and when we look, because right now we're just kind of at the concept stage. And so when we do the full design, we'll have a little more information about like the feasibility and placement and things of that nature. And so, yeah, so you'll just be voting on one design.
Okay. Thank you so
And
much.
it's a
I
yes or
appreciate
no
it.
vote. Yeah.
Okay.
No problem.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions before we move on to the concept? Okay. Yeah, so this is the concept that we have. I'll go into a little bit of explanation about why we picked cushions for you guys, and then we can kind of talk about where they're placed. So the street, Collier Avenue, is already very narrow. It's actually only 19 feet wide for most of the way, which is like 9.5-foot lanes, which is pretty narrow. Like the typical lane width is around 12 feet. So if you've noticed on your street, you don't have a center line, and it's because the lanes are so narrow that you wouldn't typically put like those 2 yellow stripes in the middle. So we wouldn't really want to narrow it any further than it already is. The volumes on the street are fairly low. We have about 282 cars per day on average, which is in line with what we would expect with a residential street, but it's nothing like crazy high like we see on some streets that we address. And so the speeds in your area, on average, the 85th percentile speed was 36 miles per hour, and the speed limit is 25. So we really want to get those down because 36 is pretty unsafe for a residential street where people might be walking or kids might be playing or something like that. Like that's a speed that, I mean, obviously you'd never want to get hit by a car, but you really don't want to get hit by a car that's going 36 miles an hour. And you don't have any sidewalks for most of the street. And so because of that, we went with speed cushions to try and basically to force people to slow down. You can go over speed cushions faster than advised, but it's going to be pretty uncomfortable and people are going to learn that pretty quickly. And so we placed them with consideration to driveways. We're never going to put a speed cushion directly in front of someone's driveway. We try to keep a few hundred feet between the cushions and an intersection. And then we also don't put them in a horizontal curve, which you don't really have many of those on your street. You really just kind of have one over here, but this area is much, it's really just commercial. There aren't any houses over here. And then we also don't put them on vertical curves that are steeper than 6%. And so your street's kind of hilly. And so we went out and took some measurements and we made sure that these cushion locations are on stretches of the road that aren't too steep for them to be safely implemented. So does anyone have any questions?
Hey, DR. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Just a quick comment on your the commercial area down there. That's a lot of the reason why there's so much high speeds on this road, is that it's a car dealership. There are people that test drive cars up and down Collier. Their employees, get off work and slam it as soon as they're on the road, taking off. So that, I don't think that's really relevant to what we're talking about right now, but I just wanted to throw that out there because I think it's important to take into consideration.
Okay, thanks for that context. Yeah.
Yara, I was going to ask, because when we put the application in, we actually put it in for Collier and Dobbs Avenue, because you can slow people down on Collier, but they're going to speed just as fast on Dobbs because it is actually more level and there's still a lot of pedestrian traffic. It's a through street. Is there anything in your notes, like, is there any reason why Dobbs was not part of this project? Is that going to be considered later? Do you have any idea?
So there were, I think, 4 streets on this application, if I remember correctly. It was on one of the earlier slides. But so when we did the prioritization, we evaluate each street separately because it's a street program versus like a neighborhood program, if that makes sense. And so when I'm sorry, I'm talking slowly because I'm trying to find the spreadsheet so I can tell you where Dobbs fell in the rankings while we're doing this, so that if I sound a little stilted, that's why. So yeah, so each street was evaluated individually, and so that's why Collier was picked and Dobbs wasn't. But I can check real quick to see where Dobbs fell.
Yeah, that would be great because like Tyler was just saying, a lot of our, I mean, the joke is, why don't you make that car dealership pay for all this? Because they're really a big, like, their mechanics drive their cars up and down to test, when someone brings it in for service and people are test driving cars, they are a very large reason why we have all the issues that we have on these roads. But yeah, Dobbs, I would be interested to know when Dobbs might be addressed or just what priority level they're at.
Yeah, that's not ideal that they're using your street as a test track. Okay. So the street applied for was Dobbs Avenue from Thomas Lane to Morton Avenue. And that one actually ranked 151 in our prioritization. And the 85th percentile speed is a bit lower than on Collier. And so I think that was the major reason that it didn't rank as high. It's 34.
So I'm sorry, you said Dobbs is 34 on the priority list. Is that what I heard you say?
Oh, no. The 85th percentile speed was 34 miles per hour. Sorry. So it was a little bit slower than it was on Collier, which contributed to it ranking a bit lower. That's not the only thing that we look at, but it will, it is 50% of it. Yeah, and so Dobbs was 151 and Collier was number 12. And so we typically do the top 25 or so. And so Dobbs is not like out of the program. It's not ruled out for traffic calming. We keep any of the streets that are applied for in our spreadsheet indefinitely. And so every cycle, we do 2 cycles a year. And so every cycle we reevaluate and reprioritize. And so eventually the other streets in the area will likely rise to the top. But every 2 years, you can reach out for us to go out and collect new data. So like, for example, if we do these measures on Collier and you start to feel like maybe the patterns on Dobbs are starting to change because it runs parallel to Collier, then we'll go out and collect new data to reevaluate Dobbs with the updated data, if that makes sense.
Yes, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
We may be getting to this, but we got a little side chat going here. As far as how do we vote, are you going to go into that a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide,
Okay.
which we can move to if we're ready. Okay, so this is kind of a visual of who will be voting on this measure. I guess this is a general overview of the extent of who will be voting. We rule out commercial occupants, so like businesses don't vote, churches don't vote, things of that nature. It has to be a residential property. So, and then the homeowner is the one who gets the vote. So unfortunately, renters can't vote. And part of the reasoning behind that is the idea that the homeowner has more of a long-term investment in a street than a renter may. Obviously, everyone's context is different, but a renter might stay for like a year or two where you'd assume that the homeowner would be in possession of the property for a bit longer. And so each residence will get 1 vote, and I shouldn't say that. Each homeowner will get 1 vote. Sorry. And there's going to be postcards sent to your mailbox, which hopefully you all got postcards that let you know that this meeting was happening. So you'll get another postcard for meeting 2, and then a 3rd postcard for voting. And the voting postcard will have a QR code that you scan that will take you to the voting website. And then there will be a unique ID associated with each voter. And so that's how we know like that the person who actually lives on the street is voting, because the website is a public facing one. So anyone could theoretically hop in there and vote. So we have to make sure that the people who are supposed to be voting are actually the ones doing it. So we give each voter a unique ID that they put in to go with their vote of yes or no on the measure. And then there's a 6-week window for people to vote in. And at the end of those 6 weeks, we tally the votes. And if 66% or more have voted yes, then the measures will be installed.
Is that 66% of total, or is that 66% of those that actually completed the survey?
66% of people that voted. So just like a regular election, it's just whoever votes, that's who we're going based off of.
Yep.
Do we have any other questions? That's the end of my slides. Other than that, it's just contact information for myself, Jara Thal. I'm the project engineer for your street. And then Gil Thomas is the program manager at NDOT. Both of our email addresses are up. So if you think of anything in the future that you want to ask any questions about, you can reach out to either or both of us and we'll get back to you. But other than that, if you don't have any further questions, thank you all for attending. I know Saturday morning meetings are kind of probably hard to get to, so thanks for coming.
Thanks, Giara. I really appreciate it. And will you be emailing a copy of the slides or maybe the recording of today's meeting just for those of us who missed the first 5 or 10 minutes?
So the recording gets posted on NDOT's YouTube channel. So after the meeting, I send it over to Gil and he posts it on their YouTube. For slides and stuff like that, just reach out to Gil and he can send you all of any information that you might need. So if you need the slides or anything, yeah, he'd be the one to send them out.
Perfect, thank you. And then our council person, is she on this call today? And is she, what role does she play, if any, from this point on? Like, is there anything I need to coordinate with her about?
No, I don't think that she's on the call, but we do keep her in the loop. So like she knows when the meetings are, we've shared the concept with her, all of that stuff. So we keep the council members looped in. And so if you do want to talk to her, you can obviously, but like you don't need to involve her any further if you don't want to, I guess is my point.
Because she's very difficult to communicate with. So I just wanted to make sure that we weren't hinging anything on her communication.
No, not at all.
So, okay. Perfect. Thanks, Yara. I'm going to get off the call now. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, of course. Have a great one. Yeah, if anyone else has any questions, we can take them now. And if not, have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.